Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, where we discuss various issues affecting our economy. There may be issues to do with agriculture, mining, manufacturing, religion or culture, even international relations we discuss here. My name is John Masogo. Today, we would like to look at NDS1 and how far we've traveled, especially in trying to realize Vision 2030. There are clusters that were clearly identified for improvement and also pillars towards that improvement. Clusters in mining, in agriculture, and so forth. And the pillars such as governance, infrastructure again, as well as financial engagement, all that the government has been involved in. And I have Dr. Abicia here, who is going to be looking through at what progress has been made by government and what impediments have also been faced. Dr. Ushokunze, welcome to Economic Forum.
Thank you, Mr. Masogo.
Yes. How has been the road so far?
Well, when we look at historically for a country which is had been operating more or less an island, we've gone over 22 years of a sanction, which had its own economic impact in terms of being separated from international institutions, financial institutions, being separated from lines of credit. And also, if you look at the private sector, it was very difficult to access loans or cheap loans. They became very expensive because of the high risk which was involved and associated with not being part of the global financial operation that could conform to the standards of the current scenario and setup that we found ourselves in. And then we lost over $40 billion worth of an economic performance. So where we're coming from and where we are at the moment, we've done quite a lot given the impediments, given the complications and the challenges that we faced as a small nation. We're just a country which had been under colonial rule from 1980, where we were still in the infancy of independence, but we still found ourselves after those 90 years of British rule and the 10 years of UDI, leading to from 1980 to the next 20 years or the next 40 years. We are not independent for 40 years or 42 years. We are independent for minus 22 years of the sanction, because there was post colonial modern day warfare, which was used to then sort of punish us for the land reform program. But having said that, we use that as history to strengthen our ways of doing business, ways of looking inwardly as a country to self-sustain ourselves and to look inwardly and to build ourselves as a nation without having to look elsewhere for a helping hand.
So, how far have we gone? We know His Excellency the President has been commissioning quite a number of projects which are supposed to make us realize Vision 2030 and so forth. Take us through some of the successes and some of the impediments, as you rightly say, that there were also some hurdles as we moved along.
Correct. There's been quite a lot of developments which are at mega level projects. For example, I was just going through the latest, which happened a few days ago, the ZIMFOS through Complex, which is a part of our Industrial Development Corporation, where fertilizer will be produced locally, whereas we used to have an import bill of $280 million per annum on importation of. This is only a blended fertilizer. I'm not talking about granulated fertilizer. Granulated fertilizer is separate. We are saving already $280 million worth of import receipts. And when we look at, and that will produce 200,000 tons worth of fertilizer. We are not going to cry no more about the war in Ukraine and Russia, because Russia and Ukraine, they produce 25% of the world's grain and fertilizer. So I've been seeing and watching a lot of, as far as the United Nations, countries crying, going on and on about how the war in Ukraine has affected their growth, economic growth. But crying alone does not solve the situation. We have said, let's do it ourselves. Zimbabwe is agrarian-based. It's an agrarian-based economy. And also mining contributes about 6% of our export receipts.
Yes. While there, Dr. Shokunze, you have told us about the scores that we've made in agriculture as well as in industrialization.
Right.
Just mention other factors before we conclude this segment of Economic Forum.
Let's talk about the achievements. When we look at the Runde Tunde River, which is second largest from Kariba, that is going to be the largest green belt in Southern Africa. When we look at the modernization of the Beitbridge border post, it has been upgraded to more or less an airport standard. And that being a transit has increased. When there's a smooth flow of goods and services, it increases our revenue inflows per day. Whereas we used to we're now clearing about 400 buses per day. We're now clearing about 1,000 to 1,500 trucks per day. Whereas we used to have cargo trucks being delayed for over a week. And when you delay a cargo truck for over a week at the border post, you are simply slowing down your economic growth, because this is where we collect taxes and revenue and road taxes for transit. Given that Zimbabwe's position, that particular border brings a lot of revenue. So when we have such an upgrade, it makes a lot of business sense. When you look at the airport expansion, it's a plus, given that it increases the smooth flow in and out in terms of when people look at the passenger airport, they believe it's just passengers. No, there's a lot of activity in terms of cargo that comes through the airports. When you look at the Victoria Falls upgrade, it now allows EU, the Emirates, international travel to come direct flights to Victoria Falls.
I'll stop you there, Doctor. We'll continue in the second segment of the program. That's Dr. Abicia Ushokunze, an economist who is helping us to take stock of how far we are moving towards Vision 2030. We're looking at different clusters as well as different pillars, whether we're scoring any successes towards that vision. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we are taking stock of Vision 2030, where we are trying to analyze how far we've gone, what successes we've scored as a country in reaching that vision, and what difficulties we've met, but overcoming them and so forth. Dr. Shokunze, in the last segment, you gave us an overview of the different clusters as well as pillars, and you went into more greater detail into agriculture as well as industry, some of the industries that have been established, especially the fertilizer manufacturing.
Correct.
But while there, maybe you want to say something about iron and steel and other mining sectors, whether we are scoring successes there, since that cluster is very important.
Yeah, whilst we are still talking about mining, mining contributes most of the export receipts for Zimbabwe. And when you look at the latest developments in the iron and steel manufacturing, where this particular plant in Zimbabwe, which is under construction and will be fully fledged by end of next year, it will be the largest iron and steel manufacturing plant in Africa. Zimbabwe used to import over $300 million per annum on iron and steel. This is raw form, and we have products that we produce from the same iron and steel, and we used to import over $80 million per annum. So that alone, those receipts or importation will translate to our coffers. It will feed into the fiscus, and those particular funds will go towards other infrastructure developments.
So yes, Dr. Ushokunze, what you're talking about is the Manidze project near Chivu.
Correct.
But how does that project, interact or feed into Zisco Steel, which for many years has been, trying to resuscitate?
According to my research on the technical side of the Zisco steel plant, once the furnace is switched off, you cannot switch it back on. But what we might extract is either remnants or products that could be used as part of what we call maybe liquefying certain components that will then be used in the new plant. But in actuality, if I'm going to talk exactitudes, normally when you switch off a furnace, you can't switch it back on. It's supposed to be running 24/7, 365 days a year. So this particular project, Manize, this is a huge project which when it kicks off, it will be producing about 1.2 million tons per annum. And then when it's full throttle, it's 5 million tons per annum. China, Mozambique consumes a lot of iron and steel. So goes for South Africa, Botswana, Namibia. And most of our clients are within the SADC region, Africa, as far as the Democratic Republic of Congo. So iron and steel is our backbone of our mining industry, because this is where it would be brilliant if we could also start producing parts for industry, motor vehicles, and also feed our chrome into that, and invite those particular car manufacturers to add value and not to export anything in raw form. We are looking at the lithium. I've been watching His Excellency talking about how none of our lithium should live in raw form. We should have our lithium batteries for our cell phones or for our cars, or for vehicular purposes, or for any other purpose for that matter. Zimbabwe should then, I was listening to the Industry and Commerce Minister when she spoke about Sikisai Nzinza, when she spoke about how we have projections and trajectories and focus on producing our own local electric vehicles. That will also save our bill on fuel. Yeah. So we are moving into an environmentally friendly environment. Most of our global forums, be it the UN, be it environmental summits, they are mainly focusing on clean energy. And this is why we have the projects like Nyabira, which is almost will be under completion next year and feeding into about 15 to 20 megawatts of electricity into the main grid.
So, Dr. Ushokunze, having said all that, what is the future of all those players who have been dealing with China as well as Zisco Steel, just to conclude this segment?
Well, when you look at whenever there's importation of any product, there are duties which are attracted. There's a lot of costs that are associated with importation. And when we have the largest iron and steel producing factory plant in Zimbabwe, that already should offer a lucrative pricing model for the locals and the existing players that have been in the industry already. There is no way, though, the existing players will then further continue to import from China or from South Africa or from Mozambique for that matter, whereas the domestic market is actually producing on behalf of the continent, the region, and the world at large. So there should be the prices should then come down to favor the local who have no importation bill or whatsoever, or customs clearance or any other taxes involved at the borders to import that particular product. So that should uplift downstream industry in a manner that would also not affect even the older Zisco steel plant. There is no way we're going to make it redundant and leave it in as much as some components may be obsolete, but there is a lot that can feed into the new Manize plant from the existing plant. And also that particular town should never lose out on the creation of this particular new plant. There's a lot that can happen at the old plant, but for other purposes, maybe not at full scale, but at some level, some percentage, there will be some level of functionality.
A very important point. Yes. A very important point that Zisco Steel will continue to be useful, and job creation is work in progress. It will continue as well. That's Dr. Abicia Ushokunze, an economist who is our guest today. We are unpacking Vision 2030 just to take stock of how far we've gone. We've looked at agriculture, we've looked at industry, we've looked at mining, and we're going to be looking at other sectors. We know His Excellency the President has been commissioning some of these projects. So we want to see how then we are benefiting as Zimbabweans towards Vision 2030. Join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are taking stock of NDS1 and the progress we are making towards Vision 2030. We are doing that with Dr. Abicia Ushokunze, who has already unpacked and analyzed the progress we've made in industry, in agriculture, in mining, and so forth. Let's come to tourism. And we talk a lot about promoting local tourism. Are we really succeeding in that area? Are we promoting it adequately so that even the locals can visit all the places of interest that we have in this country?
I'm going to respond in this manner. Whereas the locals are the ones that are supposed to be ambassadors for Zimbabwe before going outwardly. The locals should be able to enjoy what our God-given nature, our God-given place in a global village. For example, it should not be very difficult financially straining for any locals to visit Vumba or the Great Zimbabwe, which is one of the earliest civilizations, which is never talked about in most of the book that I read. You can only hear about it overseas. I have a lot of literature from the pre-colonial independence and post, as far as Europe and America, all parts of the world, they talk about the early civilization. And this particular article I read lately when I was further researching on the earliest empires, Zimbabwe was one of the earliest civilizations. And when you look at the Monomotapa, others refer to it as Monomotapa. Monomotapa is Portuguese. Let's talk about Monomotapa, a kingdom that used to stretch from Tanganyika, which is modern-day Tanzania, and then DRC, we used to call it Kakongo, and then Zambia, we named it Kambia, and then Zimbabwe, Chivavarire, and then Mozambique, we used to call it Mazambuko. That was, you are now crossing over into the oceans or the seas. That was the Monomotapa kingdom. Why should this be talked about in a foreign land, whereas locally we don't have documentaries on various platforms talking about this early civilization, talking about how we civilized the rest of the world, and as far back as 9th century. So this is what we should be talking about. When we look at tourism, we cannot only talk about Victoria Falls. There is the Great Zimbabwe. There is we have the hot springs in Manicaland, Chimanimani. We have Zimbabwe as we invented the mbira instrument, which was adopted by the Japanese and converted into a piano. It has no notes, it has no keys, but our tradition has it that our hands and they communicate with the soul. This is a traditional. This is why it is important to preserve language and culture. Your identity is preservation of language and culture. That is the first tourism. This is even when the colonialists are settled in Africa, they make sure they make your language secondhand, they make your culture secondhand. This is why a lot of people do not believe in how we used to pray to our God prior to 1890, before the Bible came through.
Yes, Dr. Ushokunze, while we're there, how should we do this maybe more effectively, especially using our own brand ambassadors, as well as ourselves as Zimbabweans actually embracing this local tourism and so forth, because most of us may be used to going to Marondera, Musha, Ekaya over the holidays. How should that culture of local tourism be inculcated in people?
I think when you want to inculcate certain values, they have to be done in your infancy. This has to be incorporated in our curricula, whether it's a kindergarten level. This is exactly what happens in the US of A, in Europe, in other parts of the world. they inculcate value that American pride first. God bless America, and no any other country on the face of the earth. So we should include and incorporate this in our curricula from kindergarten as part of our syllabus, preservation of culture and language. I've had people that have stayed, born and bred overseas, but they still preserve their language culture. Preservation of language culture, this is why we've seen East and West Africa being recognized and setting a footprint, whether in the music industry, whether it is the Nigerian movies or whether it is the Ghanaian movies, they preserve their culture. They are not worried about changing the accents or trying to impress anybody. They're trying to impress and move the agenda for their culture and language.
Actually, what you are saying, Dr. Oshokunze, is that we are our own ambassadors.
We are our own ambassadors.
Yeah, when it comes to that. But just to conclude this discussion, you've already hinted about the importance of education. And right now we have Education 5.0, which is trying to be practical, right?
Yes, correct.
From the word go.
Correct.
Just conclude this segment about talking about the importance of education, as you've already pointed out.
Correct. What a healthy economy, a healthy education. Without education, then this economy would never translate if we don't have the expertise and the skill. And if you look at the latest development in all mega projects, whether it be the Mbuzi interchange, whether it's the Mashingo Road, whether it's the airport construction, there has been the greatest number of employees are local engineers, civil engineers, and local builders. We've even had a group coming from Zambia to learn how to incorporate as much local component in terms of employment and job creation. Skills transfer has been done a lot in most of these mega projects. There has been a lot of skills transfers. We've moved away from this tendering of this expertise from this particular country. It's now Zimbabwe. Why should we produce engineers, doctors, nurses if we can't use them locally? So I'm happy that there has been a lot. Even His Excellency, he spoke about the speedy progression of the Mashingo Road and the airport and then both the interchange as a result of using the local engineers. And a local engineer is the one leading those particular projects. If you look at Wange, I think 7 and 8 or 6 and 7, whatever the case, there's been a lot of skills transfer from our graduates that are working with the Chinese on that particular project. So that skills transfer, once it's transferred, in the near future, there won't be need for any foreign component to manage or to supervise or to maintain those particular projects that we are undertaking at the moment.
Very important point that you're making there, Dr. Oshokunze, that we are our own saviors. That's Dr. Abicia Oshokunze, an economist. He has been here to take stock of how far we're doing or how far we've done in realizing Vision 2030 and also the successes that we've been scoring under NDS1. We've looked at different pillars as well as clusters in our economy. So what then remains is for me to thank you very much, Dr. Abicia Oshokunze, for coming onto Economic Forum. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen and also on the social media platforms that also are showing on your screen. If you miss some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can view them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So, on behalf of Dr. Oshokunze and the production crew, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.